Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends and listeners, wherever you are. I'm Henrik from Sweden, and this is Red Ice Radio. On our websites, redicecreations.com and redicemembers.com, you can access everything we produce and follow along in our news and regular radio programs. 3 shows a week, and about every other Wednesday, sometimes a bit more, you can hear a new Radio 314. We're on Stitcher and iTunes. You can catch a lot of our programs on YouTube, but if you want the full broadcast, sign up at redicemembers.com, where you can stream or download. Also, subscribe to our RSS feeds for all archived shows, both hours, and we also have videos and other material there for you. On our members website, we also have full instructions on how to subscribe to our RSS feeds using podcast apps for tablets and other mobile devices so that you can listen on the go. Jeanice Barcelo is our guest today. She is a birth doula and independent childbirth educator specializing in the prevention and healing of birth trauma. She is an independent speaker, TV and radio show host, and she has been an independent childbirth educator for the past 7 years, offering educational seminars and teacher trainings. Today, we are going to discuss the dark side of IVF, in vitro fertilization, and the infertility industry, especially plaguing the men and women of the West, and how the sinister plot of desirable genetics of blondes and blue-eyeds are being outsourced, sold, and in some cases even stolen, ending up in the hands of those who are controlling the IVF industry and seeking the eradication of the Nordic stock. Hi, Jeanice. Thank you for returning to Red Ice Radio. It's good to have you back. Hope you've been well since we last spoke.
Yeah, things are amazing, actually. Life is getting more beautiful all the time, and I'm really glad to be back, Heinrich. Thanks for the invitation.
Definitely, you bet. So I just had to invite you back again after I saw a fascinating post on your website about the dark side of IVF and surrogacy. There was just so many interesting points in there that I feel are very important in the context of so many other things that we address on this program. This not only brings not only the issue of why the need for IVF exists overall, with infertility and other complications being kind of a base core for this that we can talk more about later, but it also was about who controls the industry, how all of this is done, especially when we're talking about the, types of medications and unnecessary chemicals in some points even that are used, and substances that makes it even more unnatural than it has to be. But in this article, Jeanice, you also highlighted who controls the industry, whose genetics primarily it is that's being paid top dollar for right now, and who's getting this DNA. And we'll get to that later too. But maybe you can just kind of tell us a little bit first about Frozen Angels, the documentary that actually sparked your article on the subject, Jeanice.
Yeah, let me say that I belong to a Facebook group for the Association for Pre- and Perinatal Psychology. And it was in this group that I saw an article posted that was talking about 2 teenage girls who had been conceived through in vitro fertilization. And these girls were suffering. They were emotionally in extremely deep pain. And I was very, very touched by the depth of emotional pain that they were suffering. They were talking about things like their fathers being paid to abandon them, not having any connection, biological connection with the parents who raised them, feeling like they were scientific experiments their whole life, and various things, that really brought this topic into my awareness about the severity of what's happening for these children, especially as they come of age, So it was in that thread that somebody recommended the film Frozen Angels. They were saying that in Southern California, this reproductive technology is huge business. Like there's many, many children being conceived through these technologies in Southern California. And the film was about one of the top Southern California businesses that's involved in it. And I watched this film and I was horrified and disgusted by some of the things I discovered, like the topic of masturbatoriums, all right, where men go into these basically cubicles, or I would call them cells, where there's pornography, Penthouse magazine, and pornographic films, and I didn't know what else there might be. They have these machines that men can stick their penises in, and the machine will jack them off.
Really? Jeez.
Seriously.
Wow.
Seriously. So I don't know if that is at the cryobank in Southern California. Those machines were created by Chinese people. But the whole concept of the masturbatoriums was extremely, because, Heinrich, I am aware that in the sperm, there is information about the father's consciousness, like what the father is thinking at the moment he ejaculates. That information is in the sperm, and that information will go into the creation of a child. So if that father is in a sperm bank or a cryobank where they're storing, eggs and sperm and cord blood, and I mean, it's a satanic, deeply satanic institution. He's going in there, getting paid $75, right, to jack off and deliver basically a truckload of sperm to these people. They're going to turn them around and sell each of these sperm can create a fertilized egg, right, when they're merged with the egg, and they sell them for $12,000, minimum.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's a nice turnover. But in any event, I'm aware of the consciousness of the father and how important that is, and the information that's going into the sperm, because all this father is thinking about is pornography, okay, and the creation of money. Now, pornography is a very deep topic, and I hope we get to cover it today. It is another very deeply satanic thing.
Yep.
But the article, the film, made me think about these masturbatoriums. And then the other thing that I was horrified by in this film was this thing called postmortem sperm retrieval, where they are collecting sperm from dead men and from men who are declared brain dead, okay, or who are in a coma. And I have done, in my own radio shows and television shows with the People's Voice, I interviewed a doctor named Dr. Paul Byrne, who was speaking about brain death, the concept of brain death being completely fictitious and is only in existence right now so that they can steal people's organs before. They always have to harvest people's organs when the people are alive. That's the only way these organs are useful to them. They are not coming out of dead bodies. And so in the same way they're harvesting sperm, they are harvesting it from dead men within an hour or two after they die. They inject a needle into their scrotum and take the sperm out after they're dead. So they're making babies out of corpses, literally. But they're also attacking people who are unconscious in the hospital system. And I've talked with you extensively about the evil that exists within the hospital system. It is a satanic infested institution where they're stealing body parts, amongst other things, from people that are very much alive.
Let me just ask you quickly here. Do they, what you're saying is that this is obviously then done against people's consent as well, or is this only in the case where, let's say, they have a organs donator card in their wallet or something like that?
Let me say that in the United States, I don't know how it is in Sweden or in other countries, it is presumed that you are willing to be an organ donor. And if you do not have an opt-out card, they will take your organs if they want them. They have a new thing that they have out right now called the HIPAA form that people are being asked to sign every time they go to the doctor in this country. And in that HIPAA form, it says specifically a list of things that they can do without our consent, including using our body for research purposes.
Wow.
And I have, consistently refused to sign that form because I read it, but most people don't read it. And even the ones that read it are reading it backwards. They're not seeing that it's in the category where it says we can do this without your consent.
Right. Hmm.
So there's story after story coming out from parents who have gotten their sons and daughters back after death with their body parts removed. And in Israel, it is the darkest scene imaginable because they're stealing teenagers right out of their homes, shooting them, kidnapping them, and before they die, taking every single one of their organs out of their bodies. And then returning these young adults are being given back to their families, and they're cut open from their abdomen, to their necks.
Yeah, I remember in 2009 we actually had a Swedish paper reporting on this. It was a huge controversy. People can go and check out the wiki page for this. It's from 2009. The paper was called Aftonbladet, and it was the Israel controversy, where one of the photojournalists, Donald Boström, published a story called "Our Sons Are Being Plundered for Their Organs," and it went into detail exactly what you're talking about right here. And of course, it was huge controversy. But when one of these papers, of course, again, is under largely pressure from Zionist lobbies, as they all are in America and Europe, to remove the article, and they were of course anti-Semitic because they posted this and all kinds of other nonsense. But I urge people to check those kinds of stories out that verifies just what you talked about here.
Yeah, I mean, his whole story was about the Zionist Jews, right? Going into Palestine, going into Gaza in the middle of the night, taking these children out of their homes, young adults, cutting up their body parts, taking their body parts out, stealing their organs. They're selling organs for a lot of money. Like, a kidney can go for $160,000. The Israelis are extremely sociopathic, and we should go into some detail about that. And I want to clarify for people that Semitic means people that come from the Middle East. It includes the Palestinians. It includes the Syrians, the Iranians, all the peoples that live in the Middle East are Semitic. The Israelis, and especially the Zionists, okay, many of them are not Middle Eastern. Okay, so the term anti-Semite is just a label that the Zionists have been able to use effectively to try to silence those of us who are speaking out against satanic forms of evil. These Zionists are Luciferians, and they'll come right out and tell you.
Jeanice, let me ask you a little bit more here before we proceed and talk more about, surrogacy obviously is an issue in itself, where we have especially the egg then that comes from someone else. It might be sperm that even comes from someone else. It might be implanted in a third party, etc. And then you have a child born which gets parents that have no genetic similarity to them. There's a host of different configurations, if I can call it that can arise from this. But and let's talk more about that later on here, but I wanted to ask you a bit more about the sperm donors first. Do they actually profile? Did you see anything in the documentary about this? Do they actually profile not only who they are, let's say race, looks, everything like that, but even is there IQ associated with that too? Because as we know, IQ is hereditary to a large extent. So this would be a big portion of that, I would presume.
I bet that they are doing it according to IQ. They did say in the film that they're doing it according to race. And so they have vials of yellow for Asian sperm, vials that are black for black sperm, vials that are white for white sperm. They have parents that are looking for athletic types, and a lot of what parents are looking for is that they are good looking, so maybe some of what parents are looking for is intellect, and parents that have the money can purchase what they're looking for.
Yeah, it's kind of it's bridging into the designer babies kind of category really here. But let's talk just about the surrogacy here and also what's involved in the IVF procedure, because some women then that are when they need to extract eggs, etc., they go on these pretty heavy medications that actually stimulates the ovaries to produce more eggs. I think it's called hyperovulation even. And some women's bodies actually don't even recover after this. They continue to produce eggs. In some cases, they get, cancer, and this might even lead to them having to take everything out surgically. In other words, what this might mean is that a young woman's body might be misused and abused in such a manner that they get a little bit of money out from it. They go through, the hoops of the medical, industry and the drug-controlled IVF procedure, come out the other end where they might not even be able to have a child after this themselves.
Well, it's true, and I something I should say to you about this is that I'm writing a book on ultrasound, which has taken me into a very, very deep rabbit hole. But part of what they're doing with ultrasound is they're using it as a contraceptive. And what I've discovered is that if you expose the male scrotum, get this, just 2 times, 15 minutes each time, you can create infertility for a minimum of 6 months, and the infertility can be permanent. So now if you realize that these women are ultrasound is a huge part of in vitro fertilization. Every form of reproductive technology is using ultrasound. And the children that are conceived through these procedures are constantly having the ultrasound frequencies blasted at them repeatedly, week after week, month after month, okay? Such that if you know that it's causing infertility to adult men, what do we think it's going to do to the woman, okay, whose eggs are also being blasted, and the children who are developing in the womb? What's going to happen to the developing ovaries or the developing testes? Okay, it's a slim chance that these children are going to come out and be fertile, which is a good thing in a way, because these children have been deprived in such an enormous way of the basic essence in creating life, which is human love. Okay, it is absolutely missing from their conceptions. It's not there. Everything is about money, it's about pornography, and it's about a satanic medical institution that is interested in usurping the role of God and trying to prove themselves equal with the Creator, right? Trying to take over the role of creating life, as if they themselves have the power to do what the Creator has done in such a magnificently love-filled way. All right, but these children are conceived without love, and they're gestated without love. Because when you see the movie Frozen Angels, right, there's 2 women who are surrogate mothers who both speak about detaching completely from their pregnancy, having no bond for the entire 9 months that this child is in the womb after completely loveless conception. They're gestated for 9 months in a loveless womb and then handed over to people with whom they have no loving connection whatsoever.
Yeah.
So this is extremely dark.
So that has to be the worst configuration, I guess, of what could arise here, because in some cases, of course, there are, I think, good relationships, let's say, between the biological parents who both, might be, part of it in that case and using a third party and their complications for other reasons. But nonetheless, what you're getting at here is that there are the industry side of this, meaning that it's loveless, as you say, and it's just for either it's for the sake of the money, or I do believe that there are other people out there that actually sincerely want to help people, though, too, to be fair towards some of the surrogates out there and whatnot. But ultimately, the root of this problem is infertility, something which we are completely just enamored by in the West right now. And there are so many reasons for this, just as you brought up here, even with the infrasound itself. But as we know, cell phones and sperm count, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff, materials. We've been repeating this over and over in the program now, but it's we have to continue to repeat this so people understand that everything you're doing in your life is contributing to the fact that if you are going to be able to have children or not, and it goes for both men and women. It's from all the materials that we touch and sleep on and wear on our clothes, to the food that we eat, to the chemicals we put on our bodies, and everything in between there. What would you say would be a way out in this situation, Jeanice, in terms of getting back fertility again for a lot of these people? Do you think that this is something that is actually, it's a reversible, so we might not even be in a position where we have to use, IVF and all these other, kind of chemical medicinal procedures right now?
Absolutely. I mean, I totally think it's reversible naturally. And when we deal with the psychology of what's happening for people, let me give you a personal example. All right. My first marriage was to an adopted man. He had been adopted as an infant. So naturally, when he came of age, he had a lot of ambivalence about pregnancy and childbirth because he was carrying trauma. And this manifested as a low sperm count, his ambivalence. If we had at the time been able to speak to counselors who understood prenatal trauma, who understood birth trauma, okay, who understood the damage being done to these babies when they're given up for adoption or when their mother is considering abortion, or many, many things are happening to babies in the womb today, to make us very ambivalent about pregnancy and childbirth, which is also having a strong influence on our fertility. So we have to deal with the underlying psychology of what's causing the infertility, and that's not to undermine the physical aspects of this, because we are being poisoned, and we are deliberately poisoning ourselves. We are, there's men out here in the United States where I live who are willfully using pesticides. They're involved in what's called landscaping and walking around spraying poison and walking in the areas where they're using the poison. And these poisons are known to cause their sperm to die. Okay? It creates infertility.
It's spermicide. That's what it is.
But they have to make the choice, number one, to get conscious and to choose self-love and self-respect, that I'm not going to do that kind of work. Then they're surprised when their children, if they have any children, are born with all kinds of birth defects and stuff. Well, look at what you're putting in your body. Look at what you're putting on your body. Look at what you're breathing in the form of perfumes and colognes and hairsprays and chemtrails. Okay,
yeah.
Some of it we can't get away from, but we have to make the choice. This is totally reversible. It is entirely up to us. I'm of the mind, Heinrich, frankly, that even women who are past menopause can still conceive, because we can have conscious control over when we release an egg. Right.
Now, I believe there's a heck of a lot that we can do, just as you said about, sure, there are things that are outside of our, control, and the way that there are massive, poisoning schemes going on in various walks of life. But I think that if we apply everything that we can and being conscious about what we do, eat and consume and wear and everything else, then it definitely is a chance of an increase, or even not putting the cell phone in the pocket right next to the testes and things like that.
Wow.
I mean, it's very important,
Exactly. I just had a personal experience with that. A friend here, 45 years old, and he's wearing his cell phone right next to his testicles. And even after I tell him and send him articles about it, he persists.
Yeah.
So this is complete self-loathing to me, or absolutely a lack of self-love and self-care that is very, very common, especially in the United States. So we can reverse it, but we have to want to, we have to choose to, and not to give our power over to these demonic medical technicians. Not all of them are demonic, of course, but the system itself is satanic. And many people don't realize what they're caught up in. I made this mistake, when my husband had a low sperm count. They gave me the drugs, right? They gave me fertility drugs. And then I got pregnant from the fertility drugs, but my baby was deformed because they forgot to tell me.
Oh
You know,
boy.
that
Yeah.
these drugs cause birth defects.
Yeah.
So the amount of suffering that this industry causes is, you can't count it. You know, it's so huge.
There is a natural way of I mean, the first IVF procedures were done in England, I believe. They were natural. I mean, the medical companies have been, this is something that they always do. They jump on it later. They get involved and say, how can we get into this industry and make more money? And they charge massive amounts of money for these, medications and everything else that they're using. So again, to point out, sure, as bad as it is, there's still a natural and much, cleaner and I think earthly, way of doing this if there are complications for some reason, and a more, closely connected and loving procedure that you can go through if this is a necessary evil, if we can put it that way.
Well, let me say, as somebody that went through it, okay, I was married. I was very much in love with my husband at the time. He came in and had to ejaculate, right? He had to masturbate and ejaculate into a cup and give them a cup, and then they spin his sperm in some kind of machine to separate things out, and then they take a needle literally and insert that into my vagina to inject his sperm into my vagina. That's the best case scenario.
Right.
And it hurt so bad. I can't tell you how much pain I was in when they did it. All right, this is so far removed from the natural order of creating life.
Mm.
And there's nothing good about it. There's nothing pretty about it. And it's especially troubling to me. And it ended up in a deformed child. And the suffering that I went through and that my husband went through that caused our marriage to break down. All right, you can't compensate for that. So there's nothing good about it. I can't see a darn thing good about it. It's just completely dark. And I had to go through it myself to understand, how extremely dark it really is. And I had the best case scenario. I didn't use somebody else's eggs. I didn't have somebody else's womb implanted in my body. I took their drugs and I let them inject my husband's sperm into me.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about the issues about this, Jeanice. I can't recall if I think we discussed a little bit of this last time you were on as well, some of the complications you've gone through and everything else. Now, let's just for a moment talk a little bit about the low birth rates, again, especially in the West, and as a result of everything that we're seeing of our kind of synthetic and artificial lifestyle, because certainly a lot of conveniences have come with our way of life, and also that has come with a price. And I think that to a large extent, this has come through our usage, obviously, of materials that we shouldn't use. I mean, plastics and all kinds of conveniences in that regard. I think if we still would have been tied to the natural elements of this planet and used, stone and wood and glass and metal and everything else, for example, natural, fibers in terms of clothing and bedding and everything else, it definitely would have been better. But is there something you can say about why do you think we're seeing low birth rates? Because I think it's not only related to the infertility issue. I think that there's a whole nother conspiracy, frankly, as part of this, specifically in the West again, of how to break up the family, separate the women from the men, in many cases getting women focused on every other conceivable trapping, as opposed to having children and spending your life wanting to raise children.
There's so much going on with this, and I have some very important quotes to share with you. The women's liberation movement was Rockefeller funded. Okay, there were basically two reasons that were given for the women's liberation movement, and this is according to a rabbi. One is that they couldn't tax the women before women's liberation. So they needed to find a way to get them into the workforce and begin to tax the other half of the population. But the other one was to break up the family and to get the children into the schools, because within the schools, they can be programmed, and they are being programmed, and they're being manipulated around sexuality especially, and this is escalating hugely. If we have time to talk about it, this is a very important topic. There is an interest to get us to stop reproducing because they have a depopulation agenda. So if they can get the kids in the school, get them interested in homosexuality, right, get them addicted to pornography very, very early, 5-year-olds are being presented with pornographic images.
Yeah.
Kindergarten.
Sickening.
So
at a time when they don't even have this, in their biology yet, and yet at the same time, sexual education and everything else is being pushed on them, forced on them. In some cases, as you say, it's even education in terms of homosexuality or lesbianism or everything you can imagine at a time when the child is like furthest away from that kind of stuff possible.
And it's absolutely there's an agenda behind it to get us to stop reproducing. Bill Gates has come straight out and talked about 3 things that they're doing to stop us from reproducing, which is putting money into the abortion industry, what they call reproductive health. Vaccines are causing huge infertility. There was a 3rd thing that I'm forgetting right now, but they are very, very busy. Genetically modified foods are, of course, ensuring that even if the current person that consumes them is not infertile, 3rd generation down will be infertile. So there is an agenda to create infertility, but there's also an agenda to get women, uninterested. And I have to say, from my own heart and from my own knowing, there's a deep awareness at an unconscious level that it is not safe to bring children into this world, that women that do bring children in are worried constantly for the welfare of their children, and they're basically bringing their children into a matrix where there's going to be an untold amount of suffering. And so women themselves at an unconscious level are resisting bringing children in. There's a fear, and it's a rational fear that they don't want their children to suffer. We don't want to see our children struggling and in pain, or in danger all the time. And so I don't want to undermine the consciousness of the women and the men who are prospective parents in terms of creating their own infertility. Because there are things going on, okay? There's birth trauma issues, there's prenatal trauma issues that they're carrying, and there's a knowing that this satanic matrix is not a safe place for children. So they're not, at a very deep level, many of them do not feel safe to bring them in. And so they're manifesting infertility. You've got to trust life, and that the life that you're creating will have a good life,
Yeah, no, exactly. You're right. And I mean, look at, we've been analyzing quite a bit of media lately. We're working on quite a bit in terms of both movies and TV shows and everything else. But I can't remember seeing any movie or TV show recently where they haven't showed this tremendously traumatizing and painful birth scene in practically every movie and TV show. In some cases, even so full on, like in the TV shows, that they're basically kind of showing the miserable existence that people have when they have a child or two and they have to take care of them. Instead, they want to be out, drinking, hanging at the strip bars, the classic kind of portrayal of the male these days. But it's really insidious, the propaganda that lies behind this, I believe, to actually prevent people from, getting an interest in starting a family,
Well, there's a lot that you just said to respond to. One is that, to me, Satan's number one lie, okay, next to getting almost the entire earth population to worship him as the creator through the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions, okay, these people are worshiping a demon imposter. That's not the creator. Getting people to worship him. But the second biggest lie is getting people to trade off, right, a connection based on authentic human love in exchange for carnal gratification. And so, yeah, you'll see men being represented in the strip joints and all of this debased pornographic sexuality being promoted, even in kindergarten classrooms, okay? As if that's going to bring any level of happiness whatsoever. Nothing could be further from the truth. And this is like such an important topic, okay? Because men, high school boys, right, being conditioned to be drawn to women based on their appearance, are going to bring to themselves a woman with whom they have nothing in common, no spiritual connection, no life goals that they share in common, no morality that they share in common. Only he's going to be with a shell, okay, an empty shell that looks good, and he's not going to find love there. Okay? And the same thing for the girls who are being encouraged to present themselves as sexual objects. Right here, look at me. I can provide for you a really pleasing sexual experience. Okay, and they're luring men in with the charms of their body, right? Not realizing that they're denying themselves the opportunity to connect with the one who can meet them in the heart.
Yeah.
And men that come towards a woman who's dressed in a very provocative way are not looking for love. All right, they're looking to get off. They're looking to have sex, and they'll use her. Some of them will end up making children with her. Okay, and these children will be born of artificial unions. The children will know it. The children will suffer extremely deeply, and the parents will suffer because they're in a loveless union. And hence we have an entire civilization based on false unions, all because we've been manipulated around sexuality, right, to get together with the wrong one. This is a huge topic.
It is, and of course, part of that these days is the rite of passage for young women, right? Abortion. That if it's just something you don't want to take care of, you can just abort it. I mean, it's like these are advertisements campaign running this. Actually, I do want to get your take on that later, but I do want to squeeze something in here, and I don't mean to be too divisive here, but in terms of low birth rates, I mean, let's face the facts and be honest here. This is currently something that is plaguing Western men and women more than any other, Europeans specifically. We've spoken before on the program, for example, about replacement level migrations into Europe and other Western countries. I mean, Muslims into Sweden, for example, that they don't have an issue with low birth rates. I guess it's the same would go for Mexicans in America, to be honest. I mean, the Chinese are a lot of people, Indians are a lot, even I think Africans are reaching about 1 billion now on their continent. I think Europe on the extension is about 700 million. There's also a lot of immigrants in this case there. We're about 12% of the world's populations. In many cases, we're actually already talking about minorities if we're looking at some of the European countries, specifically the Nordic countries and whatnot. But what can you say to this, Jeanice, and in terms of how this kind of ties into the bigger agenda? Is this, in your view, something that is specifically targeted towards Westerners, people of European descent?
Yes. Let me go ahead and read you this quote, okay, from the president of the Anti-Defamation League. He says, "I speak of the death of the white race, the complete removal of all means of reproduction of the so-called Aryan race. Men, we now control the destiny of this race. It is now time to make sure the white race becomes extinct through miscegenation, which is incest, right? And having a virtually zero birth rate. We have all enjoyed the vision repeated all over this world every day of the last white children playing with little dark children and knowing that they are being set up for their eventual destruction. We can ruin the ancient pure bloodline of an Aryan child by convincing him or her of the altruism of begetting interracial children."
Wow. Who was that again?
The President Abraham Foxman.
It's Foxman. Okay. Wow.
Okay.
Talk about defamation.
The Anti-Defamation League. Let me read you another quote. Okay, this is from Rabbi Abe Finkelstein, who did an incredible interview with somebody whose name I'm forgetting right now, in which he even talked about them kidnapping little Goyim children, right, draining their blood, putting the blood in the matzah, and using it for Passover and selling the body parts to McDonald's so that the Goyim would be eating their own children. You would not believe this interview, okay? On unbelievable stuff. Rabbi Finkelstein says, we can ruin the ancient pure bloodline of an Aryan child, but it's the same language.
Yeah.
Getting interracial children. We must expose the race mixing of the urban centers to the suburbs and rural areas of this country. More aggressive programs to integrate these areas are now underway through HUD. HUD is Housing and Urban Development. Poor people who need housing, okay, are going to be put together, white with black, I guess, or brown, so that we'll start mating. It is worth any price to annihilate the next generation of white children. We want every white father to feel the sting of having their children marry colored mates and produce biracial children. We must use our power to discourage white men and women who still persist in getting together from producing more white children. They will be ostracized by not becoming part of the new society of all races. This will dissuade most of them. We will deal with the less cooperative Goyim by murder and imprisonment. Finally, we will see the end of this white race. Impressionable white children will have their minds molded into the agents of their own destruction. Already, our efforts have succeeded in making the men of this race grovel at our feet.
Unbelievable. Can you believe the level of racism here? I mean, imagine if anyone else, well, if someone white mentioned something like this, you know?
Exactly. I mean, these people call themselves Jews. I don't know who they are or what they are. I mean, it's clear to me that this is not a religion that we're talking about. There's a bloodline, and these people are bloodthirsty, whoever they are, and whatever, they're Satan's spawn. But they're not like Jews that we would think of in terms of people that are practicing a religion. You know, there's something very different about these entities that makes them completely sociopathic. They call themselves Zionists, but these are the very same people who are behind these reproductive technologies and behind the whole pornographic industry. Okay, this is a very evil, to me, it's an ancient cult, okay, where they've been trying to manipulate God's world and to mutate and morph it for several generations.
There seems, Jeanice, to be an obsession here to a large extent with the Aryan blood, as was mentioned in several of these quotes already. But there is a different spin on this and a different tie-in, because if we for a moment go back to the IVF industry and look at this, and specifically what you saw in Frozen Angels as well, the interest for so-called Aryan blood or genetics here is very high on the list. Tell us a little bit more about who controls the IVF industry and how this plays into a larger agenda.
Well, I wasn't wholly surprised to find, for example, that Israel is like #1 country on the planet for in vitro fertilization. They offer IVF for free to people, as compared within the United States, it's $13,000 a pop. Okay, if you go over to Israel, if you're a citizen of Israel, you can have up to 2 children through IVF. You can have as many tries as you want, and up to 2 children at absolutely no cost. So Israel is like the #1 country in terms of how many IVF procedures they do, right? 1,600 plus per million per year is happening in Israel. And they are the ones who are primarily behind the technology and celebrating the technology and Some of them have written documents about the ethics, of this technology, and especially about the postmortem sperm retrieval. Here,
Right.
the Israelis are really, taking the sperm from dead people. They're really behind this. They're really on top of the technology involved in this and writing whole treatises on the ethics of it. Okay, and one of the main concerns for them about taking the sperm from a dead man and creating another heir is that, if he dies and he's got $1 million in the bank and you create a fifth heir and there was 4 before, then those 4 heirs are only going to get 200,000 instead of 250,000. Is that fair? Right? This is the freaking mentality. They're not worried about taking sperm out of a corpse or taking sperm from a man who is not conscious. Okay, they're worried about the financial aspect of it, which is absolutely disgustingly sickening. But this is a very Jewish mentality also, where everything's about the money. In that very same document, it says, it doesn't say in the Torah that you can't hurt somebody or do something wrong to somebody. It says if you do hurt them or you do something wrong, you need to make, reparations through money. You need to pay them.
Yeah.
So if you genocide the entire civilization of the Palestinian people, at some point they're going to have to pay them money. As if that's going to make up for what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is the mentality that we're talking about. And these are the people that are on the cutting edge. All right. In Israel, they are using the eggs from aborted human babies to create IVF babies. They're heavily involved in human cloning. And this is also why I think they want the eggs and the sperm from white people, especially blonde-haired, blue-eyed children, because they hate us. Okay, they hate the white race. They want to clone us to turn us into soulless slaves, which will be their ultimate satanic victory. Okay, to turn us into walking robots.
It's just extraordinary when you think about this. I mean, if the blonde and blue-eyed, not only surrogates, but those more importantly than providing the eggs and the men providing the sperm, this might be separate in different occasions, but there's almost like there's a massive genetic experiment going on here to mimic, if there ever was such a thing as a master race ideology, let's say in Germany, and I have my questions about that, but let's assume that that's the case. If we take that at face value, of course, it was an issue on improvement of genetics and improving the stock, if you will. But here, there's something else going on. There almost seems to be I don't know how else to put it, Jeanice, but a hijacking of the Nordic looks, if you will, and in an attempt to kind of claim it as their own. Would you say that that's a fair assessment, or is there something else going on here?
I would say, okay, the idea of the master race is a result of these people calling themselves Jews. Clearly, they've spoken about the desire to annihilate the Aryan race, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed race. They're very direct about it. Okay, so they put it on Hitler, saying he was trying to create a master race, but maybe what Hitler was actually doing, because we can't believe anything we've been told, is trying to make sure that this bloodline was saved.
Yeah.
Okay, because he knew that there was an agenda to destroy them. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I just want to reemphasize a point you mentioned there. I want everyone to think about this. We have been sold such a tremendous bag of lies when it comes to everything that has to do with the Second World War and agendas and everything else. And I think that we've seen this come to light more than ever in the last 2 years, actually. But the programming here, as soon as you begin to question some of this stuff, is enormous, which of course says something in itself. But nonetheless, I urge and appeal to all people to sanity, to logic, to rationality, and to look at this stuff, if you can, from a truly objective perspective and not the Hollywood version of events here. But I think you're onto something there, Jeanice, for sure.
I'm pretty intuitive and instinctual, but it's coming from a lot of information and coming straight out of their mouths, what they've been up to. And I'm sure this is a several generation agenda, it's coming to a head right now, and especially with these reproductive technologies. So I think they want to turn the blonde-haired, blue eyes in particular, into clones, into soulless robots and slaves, and that they will feel that this is their ultimate victory. You heard the language, and I'm trying to find it right now, of making sure that the fathers of these white children feel the sting.
Yes.
Okay, the hatred involved in that is extremely deep.
Yes.
And so is the hatred behind the desire to annihilate us.
Yes.
So we have to see where the hatred is really coming from. And in a satanic culture, everything is reversed. Okay, so now they're saying they may accuse me of all kinds of, I'm anti-Jewish. It's nonsense. Okay, the truth is, I'm telling the truth. I'm using information coming right out of their mouths to tell people what they themselves are saying. Okay, the hate is coming from the other side.
Yeah, you're right.
And it always has been.
Yep, you're right, Jeanice, and it's just an extraordinary picture once you begin to kind of lay the puzzle and to see how this has unfolded and happened, and we're in the world today where you have so many people who are, turning on themselves and feeling a hatred and maybe even voluntarily going along with this agenda that we've been talking about here. Because they feel extraordinarily good about feeling, bad about themselves. And there's a major psychological component to this. And that's part of something I want to talk more about here in the second hour as we continue. I want to talk more about, the porn industry, the anti-family propaganda, and everything else that we haven't talked about yet when it comes to the dark side of IVF and everything else. But Jeanice, please give us some of the details. You mentioned you were writing a book right now, but please tell us a little bit more about that. Give us your website so people know where to go to read your articles and follow along in your shows and everything else. So give us the details.
Okay, well, to read my articles, please visit my blog at birthofanewearth.blogspot.com. Please also visit my website at birthofanewearth.com to see the other things that I'm up to. In terms of my book, I started out wanting to write a book about the dark side of hospital birth and trauma-based mind control that's being inflicted on infants. And for some reason, I started out investigating prenatal care and ultrasound and jumped into a rabbit hole that's extremely deep.
Oh, yeah.
Because they are using the ultrasound as a form of mind control, as to create infertility and for a variety of other things. And it is mutating our children, the brains of our children, and the brains and the nervous system, and their organs, and whether they can grow or not in the womb, and it's causing miscarriages and deformities and all manner of things. So ultrasound is a very deep topic, and I didn't realize, I'm 100+ pages into just the topic of ultrasound, so it's going to be a book all on its own, which I didn't know. And it'll probably be called basically The Truth About Ultrasound. So I expect to have that done by the end of this year. And then there's going to be a series of books that I come out with. So I have that going on. I've got a beautiful curriculum that I've created to help people prepare to create life in the most sacred way and to deprogram, especially young people who are thinking about making children someday. We need to deprogram from the mind control that's teaching us to have sex in such reckless ways and to go into hospitals to birth them, and to understand how to reconnect with the divine program. So that's my curriculum. If you look on my website, birthofanewearth.com, I have a teacher training. I've got programs for men. I've got a lot of stuff there, and a lot of articles on my blog at birthofanewearth.blogspot.com.
Very good, Jeanice. That's very interesting. I'm looking forward to the book there. That's great stuff. A lot of this is, of course, things that are essential in these times, and extremely important for the preservation, basically, of of the European, if you will. We're under attack from so many different angles, and we've certainly talked about this on the program now, but this is yet another level to it, which just is just extraordinary and absolutely incredible. But we have a lot more to discuss, Jeanice, here, so please stay with me. We're going to take a short break, then we'll be right back. In the meantime, folks, go to birthofanewearth.com. We'll have the links up on the website. Check that out, and we'll pick up here